I still remember the exact moment it happened. "Sleep in the lobby," my son texted. My mind couldn't quite wrap around it. I had planned this trip for months, a small family reunion, a chance to reconnect after all the years. I thought it would be the perfect opportunity to see my son David and feel close to my family again. But now here I was, standing in front of a hotel room that had been booked for me, only to be told I had no place to stay. My son, my flesh and blood, had cancelled my reservation, and the best he could do was tell me to sleep in the lobby. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't just the fact that he'd done it. It was the complete indifference that struck me like a bolt of lightning. The very son I had raised, the boy I'd watched grow up, had no care in the world for me. He thought it was perfectly fine to leave me stranded. But I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. Not now, not ever. I stood there for a moment trying to digest what had just happened, my heart racing, my palms clammy. I looked at the hotel lobby, its cold, sterile air making me feel even more alone. But then something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to cry. Instead I smiled. It was a calm smile, one that only I could understand. I wasn't defeated, not yet. I knew exactly what to do. I turned away from the lobby and pulled out my phone. I dialed the number I had been avoiding for weeks, the number for the presidential suite. Yes, the presidential suite. I wasn't going to be treated like this. Not by my own son. Not by anyone. I booked it without hesitation. I didn't even think twice. I'd be staying in the lap of luxury, and my son would have to live with the knowledge that I wasn't the helpless old woman he thought I was. I knew he'd be furious when he found out, but at that moment I didn't care. This was my response. I wasn't going to let him take away my dignity, my independence, or my peace. The room was ready for me when I arrived. I walked past the front desk, giving the receptionist a nod. The luxury of it, the sheer comfort, was a silent declaration of my strength. I wasn't going to beg for scraps anymore. The presidential suite wasn't just a room. It was a symbol of my reclaiming power, my refusal to be pushed aside. And while I sat there, relaxing in the plush surroundings, I couldn't help but think about how David would react when he found out. Would he regret what he'd done? Would he apologize? Or would he continue to justify his actions? I had no idea. But one thing was certain, I wasn't going back to him. Not after this. Not after the way he'd treated me. He had crossed a line and there was no going back from it. I leaned back on the soft pillows, a sense of calm washing over me. I had my revenge, not in a loud, explosive way, but in the quiet strength of knowing I had done something for myself. I wasn't a doormat, and I wasn't going to be anyone's punching bag anymore. I didn't need to ask for his approval, his attention, or his love. I had my own life, my own dignity. And from now on I'd live it on my own terms. I didn't call David. I didn't need to. I knew he'd try to call me later, or perhaps send a message, asking why I'd booked the presidential suite instead of going along with his plan. But at that moment I wasn't interested in his excuses. I was alone in my room, sitting on the luxurious king-sized bed, feeling the coolness of the silk sheets beneath me. Felt strange. In a way, I had always imagined this kind of comfort as something reserved for other people, not for someone like me. And yet here I was savoring the silence, the peace, the sheer comfort of it all. I looked around the room, large, with high ceilings, an expansive view of the city. Everything was perfect. I could hear the hum of the city outside, a quiet reminder that I was in control of my life for the first time in a long while. As I sank into the plush couch by the window, I thought back to how everything had led to this moment. The planning for this trip, the excitement I had felt when I first told David that I would be coming to visit, only to be met with indifference. I had spent years taking care of him, making sure he was comfortable, making sure his life was stable. I had done everything for him, and this is how he treated me. I had spent so many nights comforting him, being there for him during tough times, but it was clear that I wasn't the one he cared for anymore. I didn't ask for much, just a little respect, a little kindness, but I wasn't even given that. I sighed, realizing that there was nothing left to do but move on. No more pleading, no more hoping. From now on, I would make my own decisions, and I would enjoy the rewards of my independence. As I looked out the window, I couldn't help but wonder what David was doing. Was he trying to convince himself that what he did was justified? Was he wondering why I hadn't responded to his text or called him back? Maybe he was even angry, thinking that I should be the one apologizing. But I wasn't going to apologize. Not for standing up for myself, not for showing him that I wasn't someone to be walked all over. I'd had enough. I had always put my family first, always thought of their needs before my own, but I was done. It was time to live for myself. I stretched out on the bed, feeling the weight of the past few days lift off my shoulders. I wasn't alone anymore. Not in this room, not in my life. I had my dignity, and that was all I needed. The silence in the room was comforting, not lonely. I wasn't abandoned, I was free. I had thought about going to the lobby to see if David had made his way there, maybe even trying to find a way to make amends, but I knew it wouldn't help. I wasn't looking for an apology. I wasn't looking for a fix. I just wanted to be left in peace. It was then that I realized how much time I had spent living for others, doing things for others. I had spent years making sure everyone else was happy, while my own happiness was put on hold. But no more. I didn't need David's approval, I didn't need anyone's validation. All I needed was my own self-respect and peace of mind. I got up from the bed and walked to the window, looking out at the busy streets below. The city was alive, full of movement and energy. It reminded me of the energy I had buried inside me for so long. The energy that had been silenced by years of being a mother, a caregiver, a wife. I had been so focused on others that I had lost touch with who I was. But now that energy was returning and it felt good. Felt right. I wasn't going to waste another minute wondering what David thought, or what anyone else thought. I had made my decision and I was at peace with it. I knew that when I went home things would be different. I wouldn't let anyone treat me the way I had been treated. I wouldn't allow myself to be discarded. I wasn't going to fade into the background of their lives anymore. I wasn't just a mother or a grandmother. I was Catherine and I deserved respect. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone, least of all to my own son. I had done enough explaining over the years and it was time to stop. I turned away from the window and walked back to the bed. I could hear the faint sound of the city below, the hum of life that felt so far removed from the situation I had just left behind. I was still in the same city, still in the same world, but I had shifted. Something inside me had changed, and I could feel the weight of it lift from my shoulders. I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was worth something. I knew my worth, and that was all that mattered. I woke up the next morning in the same luxurious room, the sunlight filtering through the heavy curtains, casting soft shadows across the plush carpet. I stretched and let out a deep breath, feeling the weight of the last few days lift even more. It was almost surreal, the calmness that had settled within me after all the chaos. It was as if the universe had given me a moment to breathe, a chance to just exist without the demands and expectations of those around me. As I sat up on the bed, I glanced at the phone on the nightstand. No messages. Wasn't surprised. David hadn't reached out, not yet. I knew he would though. He had to. I couldn't help but wonder what he was thinking. Did he regret what he had done? Did he feel guilty for treating me the way he did? I shook my head, pushing the thoughts away. It didn't matter. I had been waiting for his apology for too long. The truth was I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need his approval or his validation. What mattered now was me, my peace, my happiness. The more I thought about it, the more I realized just how much I had been walking on eggshells for years. Always concerned about everyone else, always putting their needs before mine. I had sacrificed so much, and for what? To be treated like a burden, a nuisance? I didn't need to be anyone's burden. I had spent so many years being the one who always gave, who always sacrificed. But no one ever seemed to see it. No one ever truly appreciated it. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the city below. The view was stunning, the sun casting a golden hue over the skyline. It felt almost like a metaphor for the shift that had taken place within me. Everything was still, calm, beautiful, but there was power in that stillness. A power I had never allowed myself to fully embrace before. I had always been the one who kept things together, who held the family up, who made sure everyone was okay. But I had never taken the time to check in with myself, to see if I was okay. I thought about all the years I had spent with David, raising him, teaching him, loving him. I had always hoped that he would be different, that he would see me as more than just his mother, more than just the person who took care of him. But he didn't. And now, here I was finally letting go of the expectation that he ever would. I didn't need to beg for his love or his attention anymore. I wasn't going to chase after a love that was conditional. I didn't need to beg for anything. I had done enough. I had loved enough. And now I was going to love myself. I sat down on the edge of the bed, letting the silence surround me. It wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It was the kind of peace I had been searching for my entire life, but I had never been able to find. And now I had it. All of it. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and for the first time in years I felt truly free. Free from the constant worry about how others saw me. Free from the need to prove myself. Free from the guilt of wanting something for myself. I knew that when I left this hotel, I wouldn't be the same person. I would walk out of here with my head held high, knowing that I was enough. I didn't need to do anything else to prove that. I didn't need to be the perfect mother, the perfect grandmother, the perfect everything. I just needed to be me. And that was more than enough. When I finally got up and started to pack my things, I felt lighter. The burden that had weighed on me for so long was gone. I wasn't going back to the person I used to be. I wasn't going back to the life that had left me feeling invisible and unappreciated. I was moving forward, and I was going to do it on my terms. As I left the hotel, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The past was the past, and it didn't define me anymore. I was ready to move forward, to create a life where I was seen, where I was valued, and where I was free to be exactly who I was meant to be. I woke up the next morning with the sun shining through the large windows. A new day and a new sense of clarity. The decision I had made the previous day to take control of my life, to stop begging for validation, still felt right. In the quiet of the room, I realized just how much power I had in my own hands, a power I had ignored for years. For the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. I wasn't rushing to make sense of things, to try and fix them. I wasn't worried about what anyone would think or say. My son David had shown me exactly who he was, and I didn't need his approval to feel complete. I knew that when I went home, nothing would be the same. I had changed. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but it was a shift, subtle yet powerful. As I prepared to leave the hotel, I took one last look around the room. The luxury of it was still surreal, but now it represented something more than just comfort. It was a symbol of my decision to stand up for myself, to stop putting others' needs above my own. As I gathered my belongings, I thought about the conversation that was bound to happen when I returned home. I had no idea what David would say. Would he be angry? Would he apologize? Or would he just continue to act as if nothing had happened? The thought of him didn't bother me as much as it once did. I had spent so many years bending over backward for him, for everyone around me, and for the first time I didn't need to bend anymore. I was done being the person everyone relied on without ever asking if I was okay. I had given my all, but now it was time to take back what was mine. As I checked out of the hotel, the receptionist gave me a polite smile, but I noticed the way she glanced at me. There was no judgment, just a simple acknowledgement of my presence. It was strange how, when you finally stop seeking validation from others, you begin to realize how irrelevant their opinions truly are. I left the hotel, and as I stepped into the crisp morning air, I took a deep breath. The city felt different somehow. Maybe it was because I was finally seeing it with new eyes, eyes that weren't clouded by guilt or the need for approval. I walked down the street, not with the hurried pace I used to have, but with a calm confidence that surprised even me. I was walking for myself now. No longer for the expectations of others, no longer for the role I had played in their lives. This time I was walking for me. As I made my way to the car, I thought back to the many years I had spent looking after everyone else. I had always been the one to fix things, the one to make sure everyone was happy, everyone was comfortable. But I had never been given the same consideration. Not once had anyone stopped to ask if I was okay. Not once had anyone asked if I needed help. I had always been the one offering. The thought of it made my heart ache, but I pushed it aside. There was no use in dwelling on what could have been. The past was behind me, and I was done living in it. As I drove home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. It wasn't fear or dread. It was anticipation for what was coming next. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer the person I was before. I wasn't the woman who would quietly accept disrespect. I wasn't the woman who would keep giving without receiving anything in return. I wasn't the woman who would allow herself to be overlooked, to be treated as if she didn't matter. I was someone new, someone stronger, someone who would stand up for herself, even if it meant walking away from the people she loved. When I arrived home, I took a deep breath before walking in. I knew David would be there, and I knew that a conversation was inevitable, but I wasn't afraid of it. I wasn't afraid of the confrontation. For once, I wasn't afraid to speak my truth, to let him know how his actions had affected me. I had always been the one to hold things together, to keep the peace, but no longer. It was time for me to be heard. I walked through the door and found David sitting in the living room, looking up at me with a neutral expression. The moment felt heavy, but I didn't let it intimidate me. I wasn't going to let his silence control me anymore. I took a deep breath and spoke. "We need to talk." His eyes flickered with surprise, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded, waiting for me to continue. And so I did. I spoke my truth, my voice steady, unwavering. I wasn't angry. I wasn't yelling. I was simply telling him how it had felt to be treated the way he had treated me. I wasn't looking for an apology. I wasn't looking for him to change. I just wanted him to understand. I wanted him to know that I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore, that I wasn't going to be silent in the face of disrespect. As I spoke, I saw his expression shift, his initial defensiveness fading. He didn't say much, but I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Maybe he was processing what I had said. Maybe he was beginning to understand the depth of his actions. Or maybe he wasn't. Either way, it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had spoken. I had stood up for myself. And that was enough. I stood in the living room, the silence between David and me hanging thick in the air. I had just spoken my truth, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It was strange how liberating it felt to not keep everything inside, to not bury my feelings for the sake of others. I had spent years doing that, always putting everyone's needs before my own, always letting things slide, thinking it was just part of being a mother. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let that happen again. The look on David's face told me everything. There was no immediate apology, no rush to fix things. Instead, there was just quiet contemplation, maybe even regret. But I wasn't interested in hearing empty words. I wasn't looking for him to tell me he was sorry. I was looking for him to understand. And if that meant leaving him with the truth, then so be it. It wasn't my responsibility to make him feel better about his actions. I had spent so long trying to smooth things over, to make everyone comfortable, but now I was done. Now it was his turn to sit with the discomfort. As I stood there waiting for him to say something, anything, I realized how much had changed in just a short amount of time. Just yesterday I would have been wringing my hands, worrying about what he thought, trying to find a way to fix things. But today I wasn't going to apologize for taking care of myself. I wasn't going to shrink or make myself small just to keep the peace. I wasn't afraid of the silence anymore. I wasn't afraid of what came next. I had been living for everyone else for so long that I had forgotten how to live for myself. But now I was finding that balance. I could still love my family, but I could love myself too. And if they couldn't accept that, then I would be okay. As the minutes ticked by, David finally spoke, his voice hesitant. "Mom, I didn't realize you felt like that." His words were quiet, but there was a shift in his tone, something I hadn't heard from him in years. It wasn't an apology, but it was something more. It was acknowledgement. And that was enough. I didn't need him to grovel. I didn't need him to beg for forgiveness. I needed him to see me, to understand that I wasn't just a mother, I was a person too. And in that moment I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. David's expression softened, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimpse of the son I had raised, the one who cared, the one who was capable of understanding. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't a fairy tale ending. But it was progress. And that was enough. As I turned to leave the room, I didn't feel the urge to apologize, to explain myself further. I had said what I needed to say, and that was all that mattered. I had reclaimed my voice, and I was proud of that. I didn't know what the future held for me and David, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never again let myself be treated like I didn't matter. I would never again put everyone else's needs ahead of my own. I was ready to live for me. And that was a feeling I could finally be proud of. I spent the next few days thinking about everything that had happened. I knew the conversation with David wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something different, but I wasn't sure what that would look like. For so long I had defined myself by my role in other people's lives, by the way I served my family, but now that I had started to take a step back, I felt a little lost. Not in a bad way, but in a way that felt like freedom. I was no longer tied to expectations, to the idea that I had to be the one to fix everything. I could finally focus on myself, my own needs, my own desires. But there was also an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. What was I supposed to do now? What did I want for myself? The question lingered in my mind as I walked through the quiet house. The same house that had once been filled with the sounds of family, laughter, arguments, children's voices. Now it was eerily silent. I couldn't help but notice how much space I had to fill, how much time I had to myself. It was both comforting and unsettling. I thought about the times when I would sacrifice my own happiness just to make sure everything around me was in order. How many times had I gone without, just so someone else could be comfortable? How many times had I ignored my own needs, thinking that it was selfish to care about myself? But now I was realizing that I wasn't selfish for wanting something for me. I wasn't selfish for needing time to myself, for taking care of my own heart. I was allowed to want things to take up space in my own life. I sat down on the couch and looked around the room. Felt different now. Not just the silence, but the way I felt in this space. It wasn't a place where I was expected to perform, to give. It was just mine. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was living in the shadows of others. I wasn't just a mother, a grandmother, or a wife. I was Catherine, and I had every right to take care of myself, to be happy, to live for me. I wasn't sure what was coming next, but I knew I had the power to decide. I could do whatever I wanted with the time I had left. I wasn't going to waste another moment waiting for someone else's approval, for someone else's permission to live my life. I didn't know where I would go from here, but I wasn't afraid. I had lived so much of my life in fear of disappointing others, of being left behind. But now I realized that I didn't need anyone's approval to be happy. I didn't need anyone to tell me that I was worthy. I had always been worthy. I thought about the things I had always wanted to do but never had the courage to. The dreams I had put on hold, the hobbies I had neglected, the adventures I had ignored because I was too busy making sure everyone else was okay. It was time to start living for myself. I didn't know what that would look like yet, but I was ready to find out. I knew I wouldn't be doing it alone. I had people in my life who cared about me, even if they didn't always show it the way I wanted. And I had myself for the first time in a long time fully. I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. I was ready for whatever came next. This was my time now. I wasn't going to let it slip away. I wasn't going to waste it on regret or guilt. I was going to live. And I was going to do it on my own terms. I spent the next few weeks adjusting to this new version of myself, a version that didn't depend on anyone else's approval, a version that took care of its own needs. It wasn't easy, of course. Old habits die hard. There were moments when I felt like I should call David to check in on him to see if he was okay, but then I would remember he wasn't the one I needed to check on anymore. I was the one who needed care. I was the one who needed attention. And so I turned my focus inward, asking myself the simple question I had ignored for so long. What do I want? It was such a small question, but it felt like a giant weight. For years I had been so consumed with giving to everyone else, with making sure my family was comfortable, happy, and taken care of, that I had forgotten how to focus on what I wanted. It was almost like I had lost my own voice in the shuffle of everyone else's needs. But now, as I stood in my own space, alone with my thoughts, I realized how powerful it felt to have this question. What do I want? I spent time thinking about it, letting my mind wander, and for the first time in so long I didn't feel the pressure of time. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to worry about the next thing or the next person. I could just be. It was liberating. I spent the afternoon taking a walk in the park, something I hadn't done in years. As I walked along the path, I noticed things I hadn't before. The way the leaves moved in the wind, the sound of children laughing in the distance, the smell of the grass and the earth. It was all so simple, so peaceful. For the first time, I realized I had been missing out on these little moments because I had been too busy. I didn't even need to talk to anyone. I didn't need to fill every silence with words. Just being there in that moment was enough. When I returned home, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't felt in a long time. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea, something small but satisfying. As I sat down at the kitchen table, I realized I had never really taken the time to just enjoy the simple things. Life had always been about others, about making sure everyone was happy. But now I was starting to see how much I had neglected myself. And that had to change. As I sat there sipping my tea, I knew I was on the right path. It wasn't going to be easy, of course. I had spent so many years building my identity around my family, around being a mother, a grandmother, a wife. But now I was learning to build my identity around me. Felt strange but good. I wasn't sure what the future held. I didn't know where I would go from here. But for the first time, I didn't need to know. I didn't need to plan every step. I could take things as they came. The freedom to do that was exhilarating. I didn't feel the need to make any more sacrifices. I didn't feel the need to bend over backward for anyone else. I was allowed to say no. I was allowed to take care of myself. I had spent too long taking care of everyone else, and now it was my turn. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from David. He asked how I was doing. It wasn't much, but it was something. I stared at the message for a long moment. For so many years, I had waited for him to reach out, to show concern, to care about me. But I didn't feel that urgency anymore. I didn't feel that need to respond right away. I was in control of my life now, and if David wanted to talk, he would have to meet me where I was. I took a deep breath and replied simply, "I'm doing well, David. Thank you for asking." It wasn't the long emotional response I would have given in the past, but it was enough. I didn't need to over-explain myself. I didn't need to justify how I was feeling. I was allowed to be okay without anyone else's approval. As I sent the message, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I was living my life for myself, and that was enough. The weight of the past few years had been lifted, and in its place was a new sense of freedom. I was starting to see the world differently, starting to see myself differently. And that was exactly what I needed. I had spent so much of my life giving to others that I had forgotten what it felt like to truly give to myself. For years, I had been the one holding everything together, the one who made sure everyone else was okay. I had forgotten what it was like to take care of my own needs, to focus on what I wanted, to make my own happiness a priority. But now I was learning. Slowly but surely, I was finding my way back to myself. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I felt the old urges creeping in. The desire to make sure everyone else was happy before I could even think about myself. But I didn't give in. I reminded myself that it was okay to put myself first. It wasn't selfish. It wasn't wrong. It was necessary. I had spent so many years trying to please everyone, bending over backward to make sure everyone's needs were met, only to realize that I had lost myself in the process. But not anymore. Now, when I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had learned to stand on her own 2 feet. A woman who had finally learned that her needs were just as important as anyone else's. It was a new feeling, one I hadn't felt in a long time. A feeling of empowerment. A feeling of peace. I thought about the things I wanted to do, the things I had put off for so long because I had always prioritized others. I thought about the places I wanted to visit, the books I wanted to read, the hobbies I wanted to pick up. It felt like a world of possibilities had opened up to me. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to take those steps. I wasn't afraid to start living for myself. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this new chapter of my life wasn't just about getting away from the past or distancing myself from the people who had hurt me. It was about embracing who I had become, about finally giving myself the freedom to live without the weight of everyone else's expectations. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I didn't need to apologize for wanting to be happy. It wasn't easy at first. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But those moments were fleeting. I knew deep down that I was doing what I needed to do, and that was enough. I didn't need validation from anyone else. I didn't need anyone's approval. I had my own approval, and that was all I needed. As time passed, I noticed the changes in myself. I was more confident. I was more at peace. I wasn't afraid to speak up, to ask for what I wanted, to say no when something didn't feel right. I was learning to trust myself, to trust my instincts, and to let go of the need to please others. I realized that I had been living my life for everyone else, and now it was time to live for me. It wasn't a selfish thing. It was about finding balance, about making sure that I was okay before I could take care of others. I wasn't abandoning anyone. I was simply putting my own well-being first, and that made me a better person, a better mother, a better friend. I smiled to myself, proud of how far I had come. I wasn't where I wanted to be yet, but I was on the right path. And that felt good. It felt like I was finally living my life the way it was meant to be lived, not for anyone else but for me. I knew there would be challenges ahead, that the road wouldn't always be easy, but I was ready for them. I was ready to face whatever came my way, knowing that I had the strength to overcome it. I had spent so much of my life being afraid of what others would think, of what others would say. But not anymore. I was done living in fear. I was done hiding parts of myself just to make others comfortable. I was done sacrificing my happiness for the sake of others. Now I was ready to live fully, to live freely, to live for me. I had started to feel like myself again, but there were still moments when I was reminded of just how far I had come. It wasn't easy to break free from years of patterns, from the way I had been conditioned to care for others first, to put my own needs last. But now I saw the world differently. Every day I felt more like the person I was always meant to be, not the person I had been trying to be for others. The phone rang one afternoon, and I glanced at the screen. It was David. I hadn't heard from him in a few days, and though I had been avoiding the conversation, part of me knew it was inevitable. I took a deep breath before answering. "Hi, David," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom," he replied, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking about our conversation and I just want to say, I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much I hurt you." There it was. The apology I had been waiting for, the one I thought I would never get. But as I listened, I didn't feel the rush of relief I had imagined. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate his apology. I did. But it felt different now. I didn't need it the way I once would have. "Thank you," I said. "I'm glad you understand." We sat in silence for a moment, and I realized just how much had changed. I no longer needed David's approval to feel complete. I no longer needed him to validate me or to reassure me that I was doing the right thing. I had learned to trust myself, to trust my own decisions, and to be okay with whatever happened. "I'm doing fine," I continued. "I'm really focusing on myself right now, David, and that's been really important for me." He was quiet for a moment before responding. "I understand, Mom. I think I get it now. You've always taken care of everyone else, and you deserve to take care of yourself too." There was sincerity in his voice, and I believed him. For the first time, it didn't feel like an obligation for him to apologize. It felt like an honest recognition of what I had gone through, of what I had done for him, and of the journey I had taken to find myself again. "I hope you're doing well too," I said softly. "I really do." "I am," he replied. "I'm working on things, trying to be better." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I didn't expect things to be perfect overnight, but I knew this was a step in the right direction. "Take care, David," I said. "You too, Mom. Take care of yourself. You deserve it." As I hung up, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It was the kind of calm that comes from knowing that you've done the work, that you've made the decisions that are right for you, and that, no matter what, you will be okay. The conversation with David wasn't a resolution to everything. It didn't fix everything that had happened between us, but it was a step forward. It was progress. And for me, that was enough. It was enough to know that I was living my truth, that I was living for myself. I didn't need to keep proving myself to anyone. I didn't need to keep seeking approval. I had my own approval now, and that was all I needed. The days that followed were filled with a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I spent more time doing things I loved, things that brought me joy. I read books I had been putting off for years. I took walks in the park. I even started painting again, something I hadn't done since I was much younger. Every day felt like a gift, a new beginning. And though I knew there would still be challenges ahead, I was no longer afraid. I knew now that I had the strength to face whatever came my way. I wasn't the person I used to be, the one who was constantly bending to the will of others. I was stronger now, wiser, and more in control of my own destiny. I wasn't looking for validation from anyone. I was living for me, and that felt like the greatest freedom I could ever experience. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was worthy. I knew it for myself. And as I moved forward, I did so with a newfound confidence. knowing that the most important relationship I would ever have was with myself.